In 1992, Yukari Yokoyama was born to her father Yasuo and her mother Mitsuko in Ota City, Japan. They were a normal, middle-class family who loved each other and never did anything out of the ordinary. During the holiday of Tanabata, which is a summer celebration of two lovers who have been separated meeting up, Yukari mysteriously vanished. On July 7th of 1996, Yukari was with her parents and younger sister as they attended a pachinko parlor. Mitsuko took her sister to play a machine while Yasuo took Yukari and played a different machine. Yukari was left to entertain herself however she could. When it was lunchtime, Mitsuko took the children out of the parlor to the parking lot and fed Yukari's sister, but Yukari wasn't hungry herself. They went back inside, but in classic little kid mode, Yukari told her mother that she was hungry all of a sudden. Her mother gave her a rice ball and an orange juice and told her to wait on a nearby couch so she could play one of the machines. At around 1:40 p.m., Yukari approached her mother and told her about an uncle. For those of you who don't know, uncle is a term that people in Japan use to describe older men, so it oftentimes doesn't actually refer to anyone in the family. In this case, Yukari was referring to her eventual kidnapper, but unfortunately, her mother did not understand what she was talking about. It has been speculated that Mitsuko either couldn't hear what she was saying because the parlor was too loud, or Yukari's words were simply too confusing and disjointed. After all, she was only 4 years old. 10 minutes later, Mitsuko turned around to check on her daughter, but Yukari was nowhere to be seen. Her half-eaten snack and orange juice were sitting on the couch, but the girl herself was missing. Mitsuko immediately found Yasuo and told him that she didn't know where Yukari was. The couple frantically began searching the parlor, looking in the bathrooms, the parking lot, and even beneath the parked cars. They found no trace of their daughter. Yukari's parents eventually went to the police station and reported her missing. Over the next 2 days, 70 police officers scoured the area but found nothing. None of the patrons who had been at the parlor could seem to remember seeing Yukari until the police finally found a witness who reported seeing the young girl getting into a white car around the time of her disappearance. The police reviewed the parlor's CCTV footage and found a very unsettling timeline of events. At 1:27 p.m., a man who was wearing sunglasses, a hat, sandals, and a black jacket entered the parlor. He walked straight to the bathroom and then came back out at 1:33 p.m. when he approached Yukari and sat down next to her. He began talking to her and even smoked a cigarette while having this creepy conversation. At 1:42 p.m., he got up and left the parlor. Right around this time is when Yukari went to her mother and told her about the uncle. After being dismissed by Mitsuko, Yukari walked back to the couch, then to the front entrance where she exited the parlor. There were no cameras in the parking lot, so this was the last time Yukari Yokoyama was ever seen. Disturbingly, many people believe that Yukari's case is connected to several other kidnapping cases in Ota City and Ashikaga City. Since 1979, there were 5 cases of girls between the ages of 4 and 8 being kidnapped near the border between Tochigi and Gunma prefectures. 2 of these victims went missing from parlors just like the one Yukari vanished from, and all of the girls except for Yukari were found dead in or near a river. If Yukari's case truly is connected to these other cases, then I shudder to think of what became of the poor girl. Let this serve as a reminder to always keep a close eye on your children in public spaces. You never know what kind of people are out there, keeping some very dark secrets. Seppo and Tero Boisman and Nils Wilhelm Gustafsson had been best friends since they were 12 years old. After graduating, both of them became electricians. In May of 1960, 18-year-old Seppo began dating 15-year-old Anya Tuliki Maki, and Nils began dating 15-year-old Mila Irmeli Björklund. 2 weeks after Nils' birthday, the two couples went on a camping trip near Lake Bottom in Finland's Uusimaa region. Anya and Mila's parents were reluctant to let their daughters go on a camping trip without any real adults, but they eventually caved after relentless begging. The campsite was a 30-minute drive from Helsinki, and they arrived on June 4th of 1960. The boys set up the tent on the south shore of the lake. All 4 teens would be sharing one tent, which meant it was very crowded. Their campsite was very secluded and safe. Seppo and Nils purchased gum and soda at a nearby store and then returned to the campsite at 7:15 p.m. The next morning, 2 people were going for a walk along the south shore of Lake Bottom when they heard the sounds of people moving around. It was 6 a.m., so they were curious what other people were doing this early in the morning. They managed to get to higher ground so they could get a better view of the scene, and they saw the collapsed tent that Seppo and Nils had set up the previous day. A man was lying on the tent, but they could not make out his face. He was wearing dark trousers, but that was the only identifying feature they could see. A little later, they saw another man walking away from the tent into the woods. They couldn't make out his face either. He was wearing a light-colored shirt. Around this same time, a 14-year-old boy was sitting on a rock near the lake waiting for his fishing companions to return. He noticed a young man of average height with combed brown hair, a light-colored shirt, and dark trousers walking out of the forest. The man eventually disappeared from the boy's view. A group of teenagers who were swimming in the lake saw the campsite with the collapsed tent and assumed a fight had broken out between the campers. Not wanting to get involved, they swam away. At 11:15 a.m., a man who was passing by the campsite finally took action when he saw whoever it was lying on top of the tent. He ran to a nearby construction site and used a public phone to call the police. When the police arrived with detectives, they identified Nils as the man who was on top of the tent. His face had been beaten and his eyes were swollen shut. He had several fractures to the left side of his jaw, cheekbone, and temple. He had stab wounds to his left forearm, the right side of his face, and one in his cheek that had cut through the muscle and exposed his teeth. The police looked inside the tent and found the rest of the group. Seppo was near the entrance with his hands on his chest. He had sustained blunt force trauma to the face and skull. He had also been stabbed multiple times through the tent canvas with 2 fatal injuries to his neck and chest. Anya was curled up with her face down and her shirt pulled up over her head. She had sustained blunt force trauma to her head and her skull was fractured. Mila's left leg was parallel to Anya's back and her right leg was bent on top of Anya's head. Her shirt had been pulled up to her shoulders and her jeans had been pulled to her knees. She had 3 blunt force trauma wounds to her head as well as 15 stab wounds to her neck and shoulders. Nils was still alive and was rushed to the hospital. The detectives believed the killer had cut the drawstring and let the tent collapse on top of his victims, making it impossible for them to escape. In the event that any of them managed to survive, this strategy also prevented them from seeing his face. The investigators collected all of the items from the crime scene, including clothes, bags, cigarettes, cosmetics, and Anya's book of lyrics. They found 4 knives, but none of them were the murder weapon. One of the alcohol bottles had a fingerprint that did not belong to any of the victims. Their wallets, ID cards, 1 knife, Seppo's leather jacket, 2 watches, shoes, and keys were all missing. Over the course of the next few days, police and even soldiers scoured the area looking for any more clues. 500 meters away from the crime scene, police found a pair of brown leather shoes with bloodstains on them next to the road. They found Seppo's shoes in the bushes across the road. Numerous suspects have been investigated in this case. One was a 51-year-old man named Carl Valdemar Gillstrom. Gillstrom owned a truck stop and kiosk near the store where Seppo and Nils had purchased their gum and soda. He was known for having a violent temper, and he despised campers. He was also apparently a heavy drinker. Gillstrom had been involved in several violent attacks before. One time when he had been illegally hunting, he had shot a man in the chest for asking him to leave the man's property. On a different occasion, he had smashed the glass of a truck that was driving through the area. Gillstrom was known to carry a knife and a steel pipe on him at all times, which would certainly correspond with the murder weapons in this case. He was also infamous for vandalizing unoccupied tents. A search of his home was conducted, but the police found nothing of note. Gillstrom's wife said they had been sleeping on the night in question. In 1969, Gillstrom drowned in the lake, and many people believe it was suicide. Another suspect was a man named Hans Assmann. Assmann lived several kilometers away from the shore of the lake, and a series of books suggested that he was responsible for the killings. The police did not take this theory seriously because Assmann had an alibi for the night in question. On the morning of June 6th, however, Assmann had reportedly shown up at a hospital in Helsinki with blood on his clothes. He was also the suspect in 5 different cases, and he even confessed to one of them on his deathbed. In March of 2004, Nils Gustafsson was arrested and charged with the 3 murders. According to the prosecution, he had gotten kicked out of the tent while drunk, and he proceeded to start a fight with Seppo, which escalated to murder. Gustafsson's defense lawyer argued that the killer had to have been an outsider because Gustafsson's injuries were too extensive. However, the shoes that had been worn by the killer belonged to Gustafsson, and DNA testing confirmed that blood from the 3 dead victims was on them, while Gustafsson's own blood was missing. The prosecution claimed he had murdered his friends, hidden their valuables to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, and then injured himself to avoid suspicion. They tried to argue that 2 birdwatchers had seen and confirmed Gustafsson's identity as the killer, but this was unsubstantiated. On October 7th of 2005, Gustafsson was acquitted of all charges because the prosecution did not have enough substantial evidence. Gustafsson didn't even have any known motive for killing his friends, which further suggested his innocence. To this day, the Lake Bottom murders are still unsolved. Gustafsson was paid a hefty sum of money to make up for the mental suffering he underwent during the trial, but he was ordered not to sue Finnish newspapers for defamation. Mohammed Al-Baghli was born on June 6 of 1936 in Kuwait. Growing up, Mohammed had big ambitions. He secured a job in the Kuwaiti Ministry of Oil early on in his career, and he later left the ministry to start his own oil company, which made him and his family millionaires. Despite his high and mighty career, Mohammed was a charitable man who always looked out for those who were less fortunate than himself. After the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, he provided assistance to people who had been harmed during the violence, which put him at risk of facing retaliation. He also contributed to various charities and did time as a civil servant. In his free time, Mohammed enjoyed collecting antiques and donating to the National Museum of Kuwait. He also liked going on pilgrimage trips. In 1992, Mohammed visited Romania for the first time. He was taken in by the beauty of the country, and he ended up buying a piece of land in Cheia in 1993. Him and his family would use this space as a summer home, but as he grew older, Mohammed developed a heart condition. Due to his medical complications, he required extensive care, and he did not want to be a burden on his family by making them take care of him. He used his land in Romania as a getaway so that he wouldn't bother his family, even going so far as to live in the guest house rather than the main area. On August 5th of 2015, Mohammed left the guest house to go for a walk. His family became concerned when he failed to come back, and they searched for him in a nearby village with some of the locals. They figured it would be easy to find him due to his advanced age, medical condition, and appearance. After all, Mohammed was wearing a traditional Arab outfit called a thob, and he was carrying a mahogany walking stick with a silver handle in a rural part of Romania. He would stick out from the locals like a sore thumb. However, the group was unable to locate him, and they eventually got the police involved. Hundreds of people, including police officers, firefighters, and the Romanian armed forces, launched a massive search effort for Mohammed, but even with the help of 40 sniffer dogs, no trace of the businessman was ever found. 2 people had seen Mohammed on the day of his disappearance. Irina Nicoleta Montinu had been Mohammed's housekeeper, and she reported that she had told Mohammed she was going to vacuum shortly before he left for his walk. When she finished vacuuming, Mohammed was gone. The second witness was Via Genoveva, who told the authorities that she had seen Mohammed walking across a nearby road and entering the yard of a boarding house. The search effort was ultimately unsuccessful, and Mohammed's fate is still unknown to this day. One theory was suggested after a small plane that had crashed in the same general area was recovered. The plane had been completely destroyed, and the pilot had intentionally disrupted the air navigation and surveillance system. The theory suggests that Mohammed had been kidnapped and smuggled out of Prahova County on the plane, but died in the crash. Mohammed's own family do not support this theory, and it has neither been confirmed nor denied. In total, the search effort for Mohammed Al-Baghli was the most expensive one in history, having involved satellite imagery and submarine navigation to search lakes. Hopefully, Mohammed's family was able to move on and continue the charitable work he had always strived to support.